Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the SITA podcast. Today, we're here to talk about airline sustainability, the journey to net zero in 2050. And today, I have with me two experts from the airline industry who are also very focused on sustainability. So before we get started, Igor, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm really happy to be here today. My name is Igor Dimnik. I'm the Vice President of Product at SITA, at one of the business units, SITA for Aircraft, that is really focused on all processes around the aircraft. So I've been in the industry for more than 20 years. My background is in airline operations, then moved more to the technology-related roles in product management and have been managing product management teams for more than 10 years. In technology space within aviation industry. Yeah.
Excellent. Dirk?
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm Dirk Singer. I'm the Head of Sustainability for Simply Flying. We are a consultancy that works with airlines and airports to help them reach their net zero goals. We also work with a lot of startups in this space. We're launching an accelerator next year. I also wrote a book on aviation sustainability called Sustainability in the Air, which came out at the end of last year.
Excellent. Well, I'm really looking forward to what we're going to talk about today because obviously, understandably, it's a very hot topic on everyone's lips. And I know you've been to a conference yesterday and
Indeed.
over the next couple of days to sort of talking about this very subject. And I think it would be interesting to sort of weave in some of what you've heard over the last day or so into the conversation. But I think a good place to start. What are the biggest challenges facing the airlines today in terms of their journey to net zero?
Well, I mean, the journey is long and the hill is very steep, I would say. And obviously, the big challenge at the moment is, how to get enough SAF. That's, I think, is the biggest one, and that's what everybody's talking about.
That's sustainable fuel.
That's
isn't
the
it?
sustainable aviation fuel. Yeah, exactly. So, one thing that we're really noticing is that with all the upcoming mandates and regulation coming in, I feel like there is there's a big question mark among airlines, right? Because some of these initiatives that they used to kind of they have been putting in place in the last several years, like getting more fuel efficient modern aircraft, or even like looking at how they can optimize the weight of their aircraft, or even like some waste reduction policies. All of that was sort of in their, they could control the timeline, right? It was, they could make decisions on how and when to implement these. But now when it comes to all this upcoming regulation, it's really the timeline is not something they control. And I sense a lot of question marks, a lot of stress, confusion, and a little bit of chaos, if I may admit, with airlines on how actually to deal with all of this, what's coming upon them. Yeah.
So I guess they've dealt with the low-hanging fruit, if you like, as you say, the things in their control, but there's a lot they can't control because SAF isn't even available at many places, is it? It's quite limited.
No, it's not. I mean, it's a big, I don't know, it's very hard to understand where is it available, in which quantities, and how to get it.
Dirk, how about you?
So I was you mentioned that the conference that are happening at the moment, and obviously there was Aviation Carbon happening yesterday at Heathrow, and I was on a panel about aviation social license, and I was asked pretty much this question. I gave the answer of the 2 C's, which is credibility and cash, to take each of those. So first of all, credibility. I recently looked at media headlines from 2014 about aviation and sustainability, and actually, if I put those headlines in front of you now, and just blanked out the dates, you would think that they were from today.
Really?
Because it was the same things. It was it was SAF trials, it was trash to SAF pilot projects, it was electric aircraft flying at Farnborough. It was the same things. And there's a suspicion that as an industry that we are we have a habit of making showy announcements and targets which are then not met. Now.
Right.
Individually, there's a good reason why each of those things didn't happen. But together, it does build up a narrative, that we are kind of trying to push the problem to the side. And I think that there is some, that we do have a case to answer that. And obviously, Igor mentioned the mandates. One of the things the mandates will do is it make sure that we have to stick to a certain timetable and things have to happen at a certain time. The second thing is cash. I mean, I'm often asked, am I an optimist in this industry? And I am. And the reason why I am is because I speak to a lot of startups who are doing some very innovative things, from everything from sustainable aviation fuel to, to next generation propulsion systems. But of course, the problem is that all of this is very capital intensive. To build a clean sheet aircraft will cost, billions of dollars. There was a Dutch aircraft company, Aviation, last year, an electric aircraft startup, which estimated that the total cost of bringing its aircraft to life would be $5 to $8 billion. To build a SAF plant will cost several $100 million minimum. And obviously, margins in the industry are quite tight. The industry does not have, does not make the kind of profits to finance this. So the question is, where is that going to come from? And those are the two areas I think that we need to, deal with.
And it's interesting, your point about credibility, and I think, matching that point to what you were saying about a lack of clarity and direction for the airlines to go in. Do you think, I'm assuming those are two sides of the same coin. Is there a reason that, as you said, there are good reasons that some of these things haven't happened? Is that partly down to the lack of direction, the lack of legislation or mandating?
Yeah, let's take one very concrete example. So a lot of people, everyone I'm sure listening to this podcast will be aware that last year that Virgin Atlantic did 100% SAF flight across the Atlantic, using heifer-based SAF, which is essentially made from used cooking oil. But what fewer people know is that there have been flights like that in the past. So if you go back to 2012, Virgin ran a SAF flight using coconut waste and coconut husks. Now, that never really progressed because, one of the things Igor alluded to is that, that the SAF space is very much in its infancy and it's not really suitable as a feedstock to carry forward. It's too expensive and there's not enough of it and so on and so forth. So there's a certain sense that we are still finding our way and having to find what actually works.
Let's talk about cash, your second point.
Right.
Because we were talking about this just before we recorded, weren't we? Because it's, as you mentioned, the airlines are on wafer-thin margins. There's not a lot of cash floating around. COVID really set things back a long time.
Right.
So who's going to pay for it? Because the other balance is consumers don't want to pay a lot for flights anymore. So, who's going to pay for it?
Well, there is a proposal on the, several proposals on the table that passengers should pay for it, but that the passengers who fly the most should pay for it. And this comes into the idea of a frequent flyer tax. And there's one that was done by the ICCT, so the International Council for Clean Transportation, a big think tank in this area. And they published a proposal last year where, if applied across a global scale, which is obviously has huge practical difficulties, it would finance 80% of the decarbonisation cost of aviation, which is about $4 trillion that's needed to 2050. The way that would work is people like me, I flew 15 times over the past year, would pay a bit more, and someone who's only flying once to go on vacation wouldn't, or people in the so-called global south who haven't had the opportunity to fly yet. So I believe that that it works that your first flight is free, your second flight costs is $9, and then it goes up to your 20th flight, which comes to $177. And I would argue that if you're flying 20 times a year, a lot of that is for work, and probably it's not an outrageous surcharge to put on. Now, obviously, the airlines are very much against this because it hits their most profitable customer segment, which is the frequent flyers. But I personally think that give it 5, 6, 7 years, to 2030, and this idea will be on the table again. We'll be talking about it once again.
Yeah, but this is not so far away, right? So because you have all these mandates coming in, especially next year is a big one, right? Because you will have the Refuel EU and the others, right? And Corsia will really step in. So, and it's going to really hit hard on the airline's bottom line, right? So, we did some estimations, and if you would take a one long haul flight from Spain to Colombia or somewhere, right? And then actually if you take the flight this year, right, and use the same price for the flight next year, right, then I think your profit margin goes significantly down, right? So we did some simulations from 5% to 1.4%. And it's really the question, and we're not talking about it's an economy flight, right? So with a holiday kind of style of pricing, right?
Yeah.
So it's really to your point, Dirk, I don't think you can really penalize further those passengers, but I think airlines will need to do something about it, right? Either increase the price or actually ask the passengers to contribute or take the hit, and then there's a really question of competitiveness and how will this all be. And to the point of mandates and the things you've been talking about, I think the big issue is the consistency, right? Because there's different rules and regulations coming into place around the world with a different intensity, with a different approach, with a different amounts. And that is really what makes it very, very complex for airlines to actually follow something, as we said. So there needs to be some sort of a better synchronization of all these different mandates and directions in which we are, taking the industry towards.
But I think what I would say is, obviously here in Europe, both in the UK and the European Union, in terms of mandates, we are further ahead. And there's an argument that that we're both setting the pace, and that we're that airlines here are being penalised to a certain extent because other areas of the world don't have that. But in a sense, other areas are starting to follow. Like Singapore obviously has a mandate, I think, from 2026. Japan, in North America, British Columbia has one from 2026. So, so the dial is starting to shift. That that other countries and regions are, maybe the mandates won't look quite like they do in the UK and in the EU, but there is something starting to be sort of put in place.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think it's exactly that. And we are monitoring this map of different regulation coming up in effect around the world. And you can really see this, on a monthly basis, the map is sort of shifting and changing, which is in a way exciting, and things are moving in the right direction. There is still a question of consistency and how airlines can actually manage this complexity of, the rules being different in different parts of the world.
Because there's just no consensus, is there? I mean, I think COP24 over the last few weeks has definitely highlighted the lack of consistency, as you say. But I guess if the general trend is going in the right direction, that's a good sign. And I would imagine it's probably like a lot of things. You only really see it when you look back, when you see the progress from 10 years ago to today. So what are the airlines doing today, like right now? So obviously there's all those things that need to improve and change over the next 10, 20, 30 years. But what are the things they can do right now that will make a big impact longer term?
You mean what they're doing when they're not panicking?
Yes, when they're not running around going,
Well, I mean, as an industry, right? I mean, we have been we became so much more. I think there was I don't have the exact number in my head, but we achieved in the 20 years, from the 80s to the 2000s, a 35% fuel efficiency, right? So it's really as an industry, we did so much already to, and I think we've been on this trend to do so, right? For the most reason, the cost driven, right? For the most part. And I would say we're continuing to do so, right? So, and what I feel the airlines are doing now intensively is really looking into how they can optimize the operations, right? Because the operational efficiency pillar of the net zero was a pillar that wasn't really given so much attention, I feel, in a few years ago. But I really feel that this is the pillar where airlines can really do a lot today. Really look at their operations and really look how they can engage smart solutions to help them to optimize their flights and reduce the fuel burn and CO2 emissions today. So there's still a lot, and there's as well there's a lot of inefficiency still in the system. Especially between the airlines and the ANSPs, the way how we fly, and sometimes when you look the flights from within Europe, right, they go zigzag, and you're just wondering why, right? I mean, there's a lot of reasons why.
I guess weather has a big impact.
Weather, but I think there's a bit of a politics and historic reasons,
of course,
and exactly.
No fly zones.
And it's really there's still inefficiency systems that can be improved on. So I feel this is something really that airlines are now starting to focus more and more in terms of optimizing that, and obviously trying to understand what is how they can manage this complexity in terms of the upcoming regulations, and all of this will actually have a significant financial impact on their bottom line, but in terms of the liabilities, right? Because I heard airlines saying, well, we know we need to offset, but where do we get those offsets, right? So, where do I buy this, So is this a financial liability now? How do I manage this? How do I budget for that, right? So I think there's a lot of these things, and it's really this topic is affecting multiple departments across the airlines. It's not anymore just a compliance team topic, right? It's not anymore just about reporting. It is about how you put your strategy in place. It's about how you budget. It is about how you run your operations, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, added to sort of to operational efficiencies. I mean, there's two areas in which the industry is starting to invest, make an impact. The first one is obviously SAF. Sort of especially with the mandates sort of kicking in the EU and UK, airlines are starting to make offtake agreements with SAF producers. I mean, yesterday, IAG, which obviously owns British Airways and Iberia among others, announced a 10-year agreement with Infinium, which is a large American company. And this is on the back of them also announcing an offtake agreement with 12, another American e-fuels company. So airlines are starting to sort of to lock in the supplies that they will need in future years. That's obviously positive because you need to do that because the mandates are obviously increasing. So you need to look ahead where that's going to come from. So these offtakes will, like the Infinium one, goes forward for about 10 years. The second thing is that they're starting to look at alternative propulsion systems, so obviously electric and hydrogen. I guess one of the best known examples in Europe is Heart Aerospace, a Swedish company which is wanting to do a 30-seater hybrid electric regional aircraft. And that has, investors in participation, everyone from, SAS to Air Canada to Air New Zealand, with a view that, aircraft like that will, obviously, they won't be sort of taking on, sort of the place of, 100 to 200 seat, narrow bodies anytime soon. But for regional and commuter routes, there is scope for them to sort of come on stream by the, by the end of the decade.
Really? Yeah. That's really interesting.
So Heart's, launch date is 2029.
Yeah.
And of course, there's actually a huge opportunity for electric aircraft on short routes to really further democratize air travel. Because, one of the things that Anders Forslund, who's the CEO of Heart Aerospace, he always says, is he shows a map of the US and he says that the US, has 5,000 airports, but actually very, very few of them are used on a regular basis. A lot of regional flights in the US have been cut because, it's not profitable. And there's noise concerns as well. And electric aviation, it carries on two things. First of all, they're cheaper to run, and secondly, they're quiet. So you there's a potential to reconnect a lot of communities which have lost, air service with the introduction of these aircraft.
That's really interesting. And I guess you could extend airport operations as well later into the night and earlier into the morning.
Absolutely.
Because there's no noise break there.
Yes.
To that point, actually, this morning I read an article that was like from a few years ago. I was rereading a few things, and actually there was like a statement in there that by mid-2020s we will see the first, like a 19-seaters electric aircraft being, used commercially, which is, still obviously not happening. So I feel like the timelines are still like... And I feel as always, the technology is, overestimated in the short run and sort of underestimated in the long run.
Yeah.
So I do feel that, we will see some delays, right, in terms of when these things will come into practice, when airlines will actually start ordering them, when they will actually be implemented, right? So I think there is still some way to go, but I feel like really in the long run, and hopefully 2050 is a long enough, long run enough. Exactly, long enough away that we'll see a significant breakthrough in all of these technologies.
And how do you think passengers will react to electric aircraft? Because obviously there's a lot of controversy about electric cars for various reasons and a lot of politics involved in it.